Hey again everyone, TheBarracuda57 here. For this video I'll be talking about ages. I'll be talking about my past experiences from child to teenager to adult. So in general this video will be set into 3 different phases. Phase 1, age 20, from child to age 20. Obviously this will be the majority of my video as I'm 20 years old now, so I can kind of talk about the transition from young to adult. The second phase, which will be an intuitive judgment on my half because I'm not this age yet, but the second phase will be 30 and how I feel the functions will develop and kind of your experience and awareness of the world would be at age 30. And for the final phase, phase 3, age 40 and beyond. Again, an intuitive judgment and kind of a projection of what I think I'll be like, or an INFJ would be like in the future. So I hope you enjoy, and yeah. Okay, I'm going to try and not bore you with the details and kind of just focus on the kind of Myers-Briggs INFJ functions side of things. But obviously I'll speed through as much as I can and try and focus on my awareness, my experiences and kind of my processes through life. I was born in Singapore and I moved to the UK, England, when I was age 1. I am half Filipino, half British. My mum, who's a Filipino, is an ISFP. I thought she was an ENFP, but I recently made her retest it again and she's come out ISFP. And my dad is an ISTJ, and from that I have tested 7 times as an INFJ across 3 different tests over the course of a year. So yeah, I'm not going to go any further than that, but that's how it is. I'm an only child and I grew up on the kind of suburbs of a small seaside town in the south of England. I've generally been by myself a lot, and I kind of often when I was really young I was in a kind of dream world. I was very good at lucid dreaming when I was young. It was something I could consciously do pretty easily and I loved doing it, and because of that I kind of didn't really have a boundary between dreams and reality, so I was very kind of like open, very kind of direct and very kind of, I don't know, everything seemed just so amazing, and just every little kind of, just the feeling of the grass, the smell of the flowers, the colours, everything was so bright and so vivid, and often in my dreams that would kind of relate. And so obviously when I was young I was quite shielded, didn't have many friends, and I often went to schools which were outside of town, so a lot of the people that became my friends in preschool and secondary school, this is the school before college for you American guys, so basically a lot of them wouldn't live in the small town that I did, so I didn't really know any people, I just kept to myself. And I was often in the garden and I played a lot in the garden and didn't really kind of interact with anyone besides myself. I drew a lot, I daydreamed a lot, I liked to sit in the garden and read a lot, and I just kind of learnt to kind of live with myself really, because I just felt I was the only one that I, could look after myself. And I often wondered how a lot of people couldn't really like live with themselves, or if they're by themselves for a very long period of time, they kind of go a bit crazy and they feel that they need kind of contact with someone. But I could just do it for days, I could do it for weeks if I needed to. So when I first went to school, when I went to preschool, when you're really young, kind of like a toddler kind of thing, just everything that I did was so different from everyone else, and the teachers would often say this, and I didn't think anything of it. I thought, well, I'm just being me, it doesn't matter if they think different, I'm happy with who I am. So often kind of like when I was trying to speak to children and stuff, people of my age, they couldn't comprehend how I was speaking, because I was speaking intuitively, laterally and abstractly. So for example, all the children might be talking about something, let's say for example a toy that they really liked, and for some reason in my head I took the image of a toy and connected it with something else which was completely kind of abstract to the actual conversation, and I'd join in, saying something which would make sense to me. But obviously, because it was completely abstract, yet for some reason it connected in my brain, the children couldn't relate at all. So I was often quite outcast, and I was by myself a lot, but I mean, I was happy with that because I've kind of been by myself a lot anyway. When I got older, and we were being taught how to do maths, learnt about English language, geography, all these things as you're getting older. I kind of went against what we were doing in the tests, and I didn't answer the tests logically, and I answered them with my own kind of heart and my own intuition, and I'd get really bad marks. And I would literally go up to the teachers after lessons and say, why can't I think this way? I mean, why do I have to think in a way where you're teaching me how to think? Isn't that, wrong? Because I'm not being myself. And the teacher said to me, everyone's individual, everyone's unique, but you need to kind of follow society's rules. Obviously, she didn't say that because I was 6 years old, but I'm saying this in a detached adult way. She said that I had to follow, the structure of society. I had to follow what they had to do, or I wouldn't pass and I wouldn't get good grades. And I would often, in lessons when they were talking, I'd be staring out the window, daydreaming, and constantly the teacher would be calling my name to get my attention. She would personally ask me the questions, not the class, because she wanted me to concentrate, and she knew I was a handful. And often I didn't do the homework, I didn't want to do what they told me to do, because I felt that actually they're destroying my imagination. I couldn't be myself because I'm following all their rules. So yeah, I got into a lot of squabbles with teachers, a lot of fights with teachers, which I didn't win obviously because they're the teacher. But I would stand up alone in the class with everyone there in the class and actually have a debate with the teacher which is right and wrong, and saying that it's just narrow-minded and it's just we're all becoming robots. So actually, just thinking back on that, that's just pretty cool to think about, that I actually could do that kind of stuff. But to me it made sense because it just felt like I wasn't being myself. As I grew up, I was often an outcast in classes, in kind of the playground. I couldn't relate to anyone, so I just played by myself. And I had this thing of I don't know, it was kind of like I kind of changed my form a lot. It's kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like how a chameleon changes its colours. I kind of, in order to fit in, I kind of had to be a contradiction of myself and not be authentic. But because I was really good at reading people's emotions and seeing how people were, their characteristics and how they acted, and how what they did was an animal base instinct and animal thoughts and group mentalities, I would see, who was in charge of a group, for example, and act just like them. Not in a way where it's fake, in a way to fit in, because I had nothing, I was always by myself and no one could understand me. Again, this is due to functions that we have. So I had to do that a lot, and often, even though I was very much like those people, I wasn't those people. But yeah, when I was really young, I was constantly using my extroverted feeling and my introverted intuition. So it was a kind of mix of the two, and I was just kind of learning how to base my judgments in the world through my feeling and my intuition. So basically, I had no idea kind of what was going on in the world, because when you're very young you just don't have a sense of what's going on, and especially when your functions are so weirdly and strangely intertwined, you kind of learn to kind of base everything you do on your feeling and your gut rather than your brain. So, for example, in ways I did this was I just kind of judged what the general energy was. I judged what the general energy of a person was, what the environment was like, to see if it was safe, to see if it was something I could easily go into. A really good example of this was often if there was a school fight, a little bit before it I would say to someone next to me, oh, there's definitely going to be a fight, something's going to happen, and then they'd turn to me and go, how do you know that? Like, where's that come from? I said, look at those two over there. I mean, that boy's raising his voice. He's standing very straight, very upright, and his hands are going everywhere. Look at his, look at his hands. Imagine if he was an animal. That's a very kind of aggressive, kind of dominant pose. And then the other one is doing the exact same, and he's not backing down. I'm saying this in an adult way, obviously. I didn't say this when I was young. Obviously we had our own interpretations of how we would explain it when we're younger. But they would go, why would you think like that? I mean, like, they'd be thinking about, card games, they'd be thinking about what toys to collect, they'd be thinking about what was on TV. I'd be thinking about what was actually going on in the environment, in the kind of community of our actual group. And I could see all the different groups, all the different social groups, and I could see the kind of energy, and whenever there was a fight I would easily be able to see it. And I said to him, there's going to be a fight, so I'm going. I'd be walking away. As I walked away, a massive crowd is gathering, and these two are already fighting. So already, I didn't want to be in that conflict. I was out of there, but I somehow knew it was happening. So yeah, that's back then when I didn't know kind of I was an INFJ. I didn't know that was my intuition. I just thought, oh, that's just a lucky guess. I'm really good at lucky guessing. And that's just generally a lot of what we did, or what I did when I was young. A lot of people think that as a type we're really psychic. We're not. It's just that we use our feeling, our intuition and our thinking all at the same time in a way where it kind of blends. We're not psychic, but at the same time we're really good at kind of judging situations, judging people, judging events. In a way it works, really. So later on, when I got closer to college, and I was much older at this stage, about 16, I was getting through class. I was doing everything that needed to be done. But when it came to exams, I'd be failing, because the exams would be structured in a way where they ask a question and you couldn't be flexible. Like, for example, I got given I did English literature when I was just before college. And we'd get given one question, and my mind would explode into 100 different answers. All things which were connected to the question, but might not actually be answering the question. And I didn't know what this was, and because of this mindset, because of this explosion of ideas, again, due to my thinking function and my feeling function over what was right, over connections, and over how I felt of the subject, probably not how I should have answered the subject, I went to see a teacher about it. I went and have a test about it, and soon after I found that I was lateral minded. I was an abstract thinker, and I used exactly 50% of my logical side and 50% of my abstract mind. Later on I found out I was an INFJ as well, but because we have 50-50 of each of our brain sides, they overlap, and because of that it can cause so much confusion. So one way I combated that when I was in school was I'd write down everything that would come into my mind that related to the question, and circled all the ones and all the words that related to the question. So I'd do a mind map, and then I'd circle the actual words and the actual connections which related exactly to the question. Because of that I aced the test easily, but until then it took me a very long time to kind of understand that that's how my brain worked. Because I couldn't relate to anyone, I went through a stage of very harsh bullying. I was called weird, freak, strange, all these things. And when I was younger, I remember I used to be very open. I used to hug people a lot. I used to compliment people. I used to give people my snacks, and they would never give anything in return, but I never thought badly of it at the time. But actually those people were just really selfish. They never gave anything back to me. I'd always be handing them grapes or crackers or something, just because they were hungry. And they'd never give me anything back, come to think of it, but that was me back then. And I was bullied a lot because no one could relate to me. I was verbally bullied. I was tricked a lot. I was tricked into doing stuff like, people would tell me to do stuff, and then call a teacher to come over and say I'm doing something stupid, and get me in trouble for doing something which wasn't even my fault. It's because I was too trusting, because I believed that You know, everyone had a very good intention. So later I just learned to listen to my intuitions and not believe, you know, that way of thinking. I had such a positive outlook on life, but it was just, I didn't have a developed intuition, and because of that I often got in trouble. I got bullied a lot. And I stopped going from the kind of touchy-feely, huggy kind of person to a very shielded person. As you can see, that's still with me now. In a way, it kind of destroyed, the bullying kind of destroyed my feeling function. So a lot of people say I'm an INTJ, even though the tests and my Enneagram says otherwise. I'm a 3W2, the achiever, which also makes me look like an INTJ, an ENFJ, when Myers-Briggs all, you know, say I'm not, so I'm basing it on that. But yeah, looking back on it, I tend to think a lot before doing something rather than jumping straight into something, because if you jump straight into something without thinking about it first, without judging what would happen, you're just going to get yourself hurt, really. And I don't want that again. It's a shame, because I was really open and now I'm really kind of reserved. And even in my kind of empathy and my protection and my aid when I help other people, it's kind of like from a detached but reserved kind of enforcement, rather than when I was younger I'd be very extroverted and get right in there and hug them and help them and look after them. So I guess that's down to bullying. But yeah, I didn't like doing things for the sake of doing things. I didn't like going to the pub or to a bar just because everyone else was. I wanted to do my own thing, really. I didn't want to kind of be a sheep and just follow what everyone else is doing. So when I was older, I was constantly jumping from group to group, but I never really belonged in a group. I never felt I belonged anywhere, because I was just isolated in my mind. So I was literally jumping from the populars to the nerdy people to the not so populars, but I was friends with everyone. I don't know how. I guess it's because I was a chameleon in a sense. I don't know if I can explain it any better than that, but I just did that really well. And it's weird, it's not in a sense it's fake, it's in a sense that you know what people are like, and you're empathetic to their way of thinking and how they process, and because of that, when you're near those people, you kind of become like those people, even though that's not who you are. And it's a massive contradiction in ourselves, because we want to be authentic, we want it to be original, and yet we constantly can blend with other people's energies, and because of that, we can kind of become other people in a massive contradiction of ourselves unconsciously without even realizing. It's pretty amazing in a way, but at the same time it's annoying, because we can only feel like we're fully by ourselves when we're on our own. Because when we're with crowds and stuff, we'll become the people that we're with in order to kind of fit in. We have to think like they do, because no one can think like we do, is basically the best I can put it. I was very rigid, I was very stubborn, I was very opinionated, and I would reserve all my judgments, and I just felt like an old man, really. I felt that my view of the world was much kind of older than everyone else's in my peer group. And the way that I would speak would be so kind of wise. I don't want to kind of up myself and look like look full of myself for saying that, but a lot of people would even nickname me Grandpa or Pops just because of how I would think. It would be so different to them. It's like they were talking to an old man. Later my voice deepened much earlier than everyone else, so it kind of backed up the fact that I sounded like an old person, which was pretty funny. But yeah, until I turned 20, I just had no clue of this, and I just felt like an old soul which couldn't relate to anyone. And I could see energies, and my way of processing was so different. Again, you know, we've all heard this, we've all been through this together. But growing up, being really detached from the world, but at the same time connected, I know. A logical person will say right now that what I've just said doesn't make sense, but to an NF it would. If I can explain that further, we're detached in a way where we can kind of be in a dream world, but at the same time we're grounded because we're brought back into reality, and our focus constantly changes from being out there, wherever that is, to if something or someone is in need of help, or in need to be kind of understood or fixed, just aided really. We'll come back from wherever we were and come back and just go in the present. So at the same time we're in two places at once, but we don't know how we do it. Again, this is due to introverted intuition and extroverted feeling. So yeah, that's all I can say of phase 1 at this point. I might add a few comments at the bottom later on, but yeah, phase 1, childhood to age 20. At the second stage, or the second phase, I'm going to make a guess at this stage, because obviously I'm not 30 years old yet, but I've literally just entered the second stage at this point. So I'm going to say that in the second stage you're kind of at the kind of time of your life where you're making important decisions, and this is usually when people say that your brain becomes even more developed. I read that when you turn 25 abouts, your brain develops even further and just opens up a bit more, and kind of the knowledge input is greater, and you learn a lot more, and just generally your brain is just much stronger than it was when you're younger. I was also told this, I don't know if it's true, that's up for you to decide, but this is a very important stage of brain development at the second stage, between 20 years old and 30 years old. It's also an important stage for decision making. Now this is usually when you want to develop your thinking function, but again, usually because in the early stages, when you've developed both of your intuition and your feeling functions, as you're growing up through childhood and through your education and your experiences, this is the stage when your thinking and your sensing might interlink and just cause trouble. Our inferior function is extroverted sensing, and usually at this time I'm going to guess that is when it comes into play, and it can be very bad, because if you use your extroverted sensing by mistake, and you don't use your intuition and you don't use your thinking, you can make really bad decisions when it comes to a job, you can make bad decisions when it comes to relationships, and you can make bad decisions just when it comes to anything really. And it could affect your life, because at this stage it's important to get decisions right. Just go with your instinct, don't listen to what other people say. Listen to what other people say, because usually they'll be the logical kind of answer to what you're trying to do, but everything logical doesn't always mean it's right, I'm going to say that much. Sensors, extroverts, people who base everything on structure and see everything in black and white will say that's everything it is, but it's not. There's a lot more in the world than just logic. If you're not open to both sides, then I think I'm not going to say anything, because that's going into another subject. But usually at this time is when the extroverted sensing comes into play, our inferior, so just be wary of it really, because it can just affect every decision you make. And use your thinking, use your intuition, and use your feeling, and just go with your gut, and you won't be wrong. And finally, stage 3, where this is when you're 30 years old, and you're going from 30 to 40 and kind of beyond that. It's kind of a stage where it takes a lot of development, and not many people, I'm going to say, probably don't get to this stage fully, and it's balancing our most dominant function, our strongest function, with our most inferior function. So that's balancing our dominant, which is introverted intuition, and our recessive or weaker function, which is extroverted sensing. Now the reason why this is difficult, unless you're naturally, you're naturally born able to do this, balance it out very well, but obviously it takes skill to balance it out normally, but obviously there might be a few out there who can naturally just do this anyway, so you've got a gift if that's the case. But usually it's in balancing both of these functions, it just takes probably for the rest of your life when it's past 30. Once you've realised that what your weakest function is and how to kind of improve it, balancing them out is just generally the logical kind of order of it after. So basically, balancing it out is difficult because we use 50-50 of our brain sides, our logical and our lateral, or our mathematical and our abstract minds. And they interlink and they overlap, and because of this it's so hard to separate one from the other, because actually it's all melded together in a big mush. This is a bit like how our dominant and our not so dominant, our weakest functions are. It's all mushed together, and it's actually just trying to separate them together and knowing what the difference is and how to kind of use them. Because the thing is, we unconsciously use our dominant function, and we unconsciously use our weakest function. And it's just learning to consciously use them whenever we need to, and just kind of not mix them up. Because again, if you use your weak function instead of your dominant function, you make bad decisions, and it's just generally more difficult because you're just trying to assess a situation based on kind of how you think rather than how you feel, and using your intuition and your gut over it, basically. Our strongest function and our most dominant function is introverted intuition. So that's, you know, thinking about future ideas and how to bring them into our reality and into the present. Again, as idealists, we constantly think about the future, and we think about future ideas and how to get to certain goals, and think about the future, which projects and brings back into the present. Now, to do that and bring it back into the present is using your sensing. It's using your extroverted sensing. Bringing you from your dreams back into reality is the jump from introverted intuition to extroverted sensing. Now, it's learning to consciously do that and do it very well, where it becomes naturally, or it just becomes second nature, you don't even have to think about it, is a skill. And it's something which it could take your entire life, you might not even do it, who knows, to actually fully be able to do it really well. Because when we're in groups and stuff, for example, you're thinking about other things and a lot of things. You can easily isolate the different thoughts and the different ways that you process when you're by yourself, but it takes a lot of skill to be able to do that in the public face with a lot of people, because it just takes skill, focus, and just honing your skills, basically. Because when you're with a lot of people, you'll think about a lot of things at once, and it's actually getting your mindset in a way where you just do it naturally, like you would when you're by yourself. That's the difference. So yeah, that's stage 3. Something, again, I can't relate to, but something I'm going to assume is what happens when you make the transition from 30 to 40 and beyond when it comes to your functions. Thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you related to the 3 different phases or stages, and I hope I explained them well enough for you to relate to and to understand. I hope you empathise with me when I was growing up, and you know, I'm not saying I hope you guys had the same experiences, because, you know, I had quite a lot of bad experiences. But again, it's making positives of negatives, so I look at them as making me stronger. But if you guys had kind of similar experiences or similar thought patterns and similar processes as you were growing up, please leave a comment in the section below. And it just generally helps to confirm who we are as people, because we just don't really know who we are. And it just kind of grounds us even more. Thank you, everyone. This is TheBarracuda57, over and out.